The Montana winter had been harsh that year. Dr. Thomas Adler kept a firm hold on the steering wheel as his truck moved along the narrow back roads of Gallatin County, the windshield wipers struggling against the steady fall of snow. At 45, he had spent nearly 20 years as a wildlife veterinarian at the Bridger Mountain Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. But something about this call felt different. Just off Miller Creek Road, Jenny, his assistant, had said on the phone an hour earlier. "A hiker found her. Says it looks bad." Document. The Bridger Mountain Wildlife Rehabilitation Center was not a large facility, just Tom, Jenny, and 3 part-time volunteers. Still, over the years, it had earned a respected name across Montana for helping injured wildlife. Tom had committed his life to the center after stepping away from a well-paying small animal clinic in Bozeman. The income had been good, but the routine of checkups and nail trims had left him feeling empty. Out here, helping wild animals that truly depended on him, he had found meaning. It was late afternoon when he spotted the blinking lights of a parked vehicle. A man in a thick parka waved him over, his breath visible in the cold air. "Over there," said the hiker, who introduced himself as Mike, pointing to a shallow ditch about 20 feet from the road. "I was taking pictures of tracks in the fresh snow. Almost missed her. Thought she was dead at first." Tom grabbed his emergency kit from the truck bed and walked over carefully. What he saw made his chest tighten. A young female bobcat, not yet fully grown, likely under 2 years old, lay curled up, her tawny coat stained with blood and dirt. One hind leg was clearly broken. Her breathing was shallow and strained. As a wildlife vet, Tom had seen his share of wounded animals: deer hit by cars, eagles with gunshot injuries, bears trapped illegally. But there was something about this bobcat's condition that hit him in a different way. She looked fragile and lost. Barely alert, she opened her golden eyes for a moment, full of fear. But she was too weak to react. "Easy, girl," he said softly, though he knew she would not understand. To her, he was just another large presence closing in while she was defenseless. Her condition was not encouraging. Alongside the broken leg, she appeared severely dehydrated. There might be internal bleeding. Her shoulder had what looked like an infected wound, maybe from a fight with another animal or perhaps barbed wire. Even more concerning, her reaction to movement and sound was minimal. She was barely conscious. "Do you think she will make it?" Mike asked, standing back. Tom did not answer right away. Many would say the humane thing to do would be to put her down. She was in pain, and her chances were uncertain. Even if she lived, the road to recovery would be long and difficult, with no guarantee of success. Wild animals often struggled to come back from serious trauma, physically and emotionally. "I am going to try," Tom finally said, more to himself than to Mike. With slow, careful motions, he gave her a small dose of ketamine from his emergency supplies, just enough to prevent any further distress while moving her. He gently covered her with a thermal blanket and lifted her into a carrier. "Thank you for finding her," he told Mike. "You might have just saved her life." Mike gave a nod, though his face showed clear doubt that the bobcat's life would last much longer. As Tom drove back to the center, his thoughts raced through treatment steps, calculating medication levels, planning tests. But underneath the clinical thinking was something harder to explain. There was something about this animal, her age, her helplessness, the tiny spark of fight still visible in her even now, that had stayed with him. "I do not know what happened to you," he said quietly to the carrier beside him, "but I promise I will give it everything I can." The rehabilitation center was silent when he returned. Jenny had left for the day, and the part-time volunteers were not due back until the morning. It was just Tom and the animals already in their care, 2 red-tailed hawks recovering from wing injuries, a young black bear cub who would stay with them through the winter before being released, and an older coyote that had been raised illegally as a pet and could never return to the wild. Tom carried the bobcat inside and into the exam room, beginning preparations for emergency care. She had not moved during the drive, but her breathing had slightly improved, a small sign of progress, and for now, that would be enough. "Let us get you stable first," he said while preparing for fluids. "Then we will take it one step at a time." The next 6 hours passed quickly. X-rays confirmed a clean break in her right hind leg and showed 2 cracked ribs. Blood work revealed she was severely anemic and fighting an infection. Her temperature was also dangerously low. The wound on her shoulder was badly infected. Tom inserted an 4-line, started antibiotics, gave her medication for pain, and carefully cleaned her wounds. The surgery for her leg would have to wait until she was stronger. It was well past midnight when Tom finally stepped back from the table. His scrubs were stained, his back sore. For now, he had done all he could. The rest was up to her. He moved her into a small, quiet recovery space in the back room, away from the other animals. He placed warming pads around her and set up monitoring equipment to alert him if her condition changed during the night. Her breathing was a little more even now, though still shallow. As he stood watching her, he realized he had not given her a name. They usually avoided naming wild animals that might one day be released. But he sensed this one would be staying with them longer than most. Gracie, he said softly. The name came to him suddenly, maybe from childhood, possibly his grandmother's middle name, or someone from a book he once read. He could not remember where it came from, but it felt right. Your name is Gracie. In the low light of the recovery room, Tom pulled a chair up beside her. Logic said he should go upstairs to his small apartment above the clinic, set an alarm to check on her every hour, and get some sleep. But he stayed in the chair instead. Something made him feel like he should not leave her just yet. Keep going, Gracie, he whispered. Just keep trying. The next 3 days would be critical. Jenny came in early the next morning and found Tom asleep in the chair, his notes on medications and vitals still open in his lap. Tom, she said quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder, you need real rest. He woke instantly, eyes moving to the monitors. She made it through the night, he said, voice tired but hopeful. Her temperature is up, and her heart rate is better. Jenny looked down at the quiet Bobcat. She's young. That helps. We need to get her to eat soon, Tom said, rubbing his eyes. And if she holds steady, we will try surgery on that leg today. Jenny had worked with Tom long enough to know when he became especially attached to a patient. It was not common, but when it did happen, she never suggested stepping back or keeping emotional distance. Some animals simply affected him more than others. I will prep the surgical room, she said instead. You go take a shower and change. I will watch her. By the afternoon, Gracie had undergone surgery to repair her broken leg with several pins. The procedure had gone smoothly, but she still had not eaten and showed little response. Even under heavy sedation, her body stayed tense, as if always expecting danger. A week passed. Then another. Physically, Gracie was making slow progress. The infection was clearing up with antibiotics. Her ribs were mending. The surgical site was clean. But her mental state was getting worse. She hid in the far corner of her kennel and pressed tightly against the wall whenever someone came near. She refused to eat when people were around, so food had to be left inside, and even then, it often went untouched or barely eaten. When treatment required direct contact, she would freeze with fear, her heart rate spiking to dangerous levels. This is not working, Jenny said on day 16, watching through the observation window. She is starving herself. If she does not start eating properly soon, we are going to lose her. Tom gave a quiet nod. I know. He had seen it before, wild animals so overwhelmed by fear that they shut down completely. The will to live, he knew, was as critical as any medicine. Have you thought about? Jenny paused, hesitant. No, Tom replied immediately, already aware of what she meant, euthanasia. Not yet. I want to try something else first. That evening, after Jenny and the volunteers had left, Tom sat in his office looking at Gracie's file. Her weight had dropped again. At this pace, they would have to begin force-feeding her soon, which would likely increase her distress. They were running out of time. He recalled the many wildlife rehabilitation seminars he had attended, the journal articles he had reviewed, the advice shared by colleagues. Wildlife medicine had made great strides in recent years. Still, some problems remained as old as the field itself. How to treat wild animals without breaking their natural instincts, how to support without taming, how to earn trust without removing their wildness. The idea did not come from any modern paper. It came from memory. Years ago, he had spent a short time with a horse trainer who specialized in helping abused animals. The man's method was simple. He would sit inside the pen with a book, ignoring the frightened horse completely. Days would pass before the horse would slowly approach him on its own. "It is about choice," the man had explained. "You cannot make them trust you. You can only give them the space to choose it." Tom glanced at his watch. It was nearly midnight. Then, with quiet resolve, he stood up, grabbed the sandwich he had not eaten earlier from the fridge, and walked down the hall toward Gracie's recovery area. Her enclosure was larger than average, designed for medium-sized mammals. It had solid walls on 3 sides and a strong glass panel in front for observation. Inside was a hiding box, a water dish, and some platforms for climbing. Gracie had used none of them. She remained in her corner. Tom took a deep breath and made a decision that broke away from standard protocol for interacting with injured wildlife. He stepped inside. Gracie's eyes widened. Her pupils grew large with fear, and a low growl came from deep in her throat, the first sound he had heard her make since she arrived. Tom avoided eye contact. He sat down on the floor near the door, far from her corner. Then he unwrapped his sandwich. He took a bite, chewing slowly, keeping his movements calm and his body language open. "Just having some dinner, Gracie," he said gently. "Pretend I am not here." For 20 minutes, he sat there, slowly eating his sandwich and occasionally sipping from his water bottle. Gracie stayed frozen in her corner, eyes locked on him, her body stiff and ready to run or defend. Tom acted as if he did not notice, though he observed every small movement she made. When he finished his meal, he stayed seated in silence for another 10 minutes. Then he gathered his things, stood up slowly and walked out, careful not to startle her or turn around. Outside, he exhaled deeply, only then realizing he had been holding his breath. It was a risky method, one Jenny would likely question. A cornered bobcat, even a young one in poor health, could still cause serious harm. But something told him this approach was worth trying. "See you tomorrow, Gracie," he said through the glass panel before heading upstairs. The following evening he returned with his dinner again. This time he also brought a book. Gracie's reaction was the same, tense, alert, growling softly, but it felt slightly less intense. As before, Tom ate quietly, read a few pages, and left after half an hour. On the third night, he brought a small serving of the specially prepared diet they had made for her, raw ground rabbit mixed with essential nutrients, and placed it on the floor, halfway between her corner and where he sat with his meal. "Thought you might want some company at dinner," he said in a calm, steady voice. For 5 nights, the pattern stayed the same. Tom entered with food for both of them, sat quietly, and either ate, read, or spoke in a soft tone about small things, the weather, the center's other animals, or articles he had read on wildlife behavior. Gracie remained in her spot, but something in her began to shift. She no longer growled. Sometimes she would lower her head slightly, watching his movements cautiously but with less fear. On the 6th night, something unexpected happened. As Tom read from his book, pretending to be fully focused, Gracie moved. Slowly, cautiously, she crept a few inches from her corner. Then a few more. By the time Tom got up to leave, she had reached nearly a third of the way toward the food and sniffed it, though she had not yet eaten. "That's it," Tom said in a whisper after stepping outside. Little steps. The real breakthrough came on the 10th night. Tom had been sitting quietly for about 20 minutes when he noticed her movement from the edge of his vision. Gracie carefully approached the food bowl he had placed on the ground. She sniffed it thoroughly, then took a small bite, never taking her eyes off him. Then another bite. And another. She was eating, really eating, for the first time since her arrival. Tom kept his reaction under control, staying still and composed. But inside, he was overjoyed. He continued reading, letting the moment pass as if it were just another evening, though a faint smile found its way onto his face. When Jenny arrived the next morning, Tom was ready to share the news. "She ate almost all of it," he told her. Jenny checked the recorded footage to confirm what he had said. "That's amazing," she said. But then she paused. "Tom, you have been going in there alone at night?" It's working, he replied simply. It is still risky, she said. She is wild, injured, and scared. That is not a safe combination. She needs to feel safe again, Tom said. Not just emotionally, it affects her whole body. The stress was breaking her down as much as the injuries. Jenny exhaled, knowing there was no use pushing back further. Just be careful, she said. I do not want to be the one explaining to the board why our lead vet ended up with Bobcat injuries. Tom smiled. Over the next few weeks, he noticed a significant change. Gracie began eating regularly, first only when Tom was nearby, and later, she started accepting food from Jenny too. With consistent nutrition, her physical healing picked up pace. The pins in her leg held well, and her ability to move improved a little more each day. But the emotional progress stood out the most. Gracie began to explore her enclosure. She climbed the platforms, showed interest in enrichment toys, and even batted at leaves that blew inside. Her eyes, once dull with pain and fear, now reflected the alert, sharp focus typical of her species. Tom kept up his evening visits, though their purpose shifted. It was no longer about helping her eat or getting used to humans. Now it felt more like something unspoken, a quiet connection between man and animal that neither fully understood. You look strong today, Tom said one evening in early spring, nearly 4 months since her rescue. He was sitting on the floor of her now larger rehabilitation space, jotting down notes on her progress while she wandered nearby, occasionally glancing toward him. Her leg had healed well, though a slight limp remained. Her fur had regained its natural shine, the distinct markings of her species visible again against her tawny coat. She was still a bit underweight but gaining steadily. From a medical perspective, Gracie was nearly ready for the final stage before possible release. She should have been moved to the outdoor pre-release enclosure weeks earlier to begin readjusting to outdoor conditions and reducing human interaction. But Tom had delayed, finding excuses to give her more time indoors. We are getting too attached, Jenny commented one afternoon as they observed Gracie from behind the window. She was pawing at a hanging toy, her movements growing more fluid every day. Both of us. But especially you. Tom did not argue. She is different. They are all different, Jenny reminded him gently. But they are not meant to stay. They belong in the wild, if they are able to return. I know, Tom replied with a sigh. I will set up the outdoor space tomorrow. That night, as if she sensed the shift that was coming, Gracie was unusually interactive. When Tom entered with his usual book and snack, she walked closer than ever before, sniffing at his boots. He stayed completely still, barely breathing as she came near, so close she nearly touched the hand resting on his knee. Hey there, he said softly. For a second he thought she might let him reach out. He had never tried, always respecting the boundary that would help her stay wild. But instead of retreating to her corner, she calmly walked to a platform about 3 feet away, curled up and began grooming herself, completely at ease with his presence. In some way, this was more powerful than physical contact. It was not about taming. It was about building something quiet and mutual, respect between two very different creatures. By the end of the week, the outdoor enclosure was ready. It was a spacious, natural setting, complete with native plants, climbing rocks, scratching logs, and a small artificial den. It was built to reduce human interaction, while still allowing discreet observation. Moving day was not easy. Gracie had to be sedated for safe transport. When she woke in the new environment, her first reaction was fear. Tom watched from a hidden observation spot as she paced the unfamiliar space, calling out in distress, vocalizations he had never heard from her before. She will adjust, Jenny said reassuringly. They always do. But Gracie did not adjust as expected. While she explored the new enclosure and made use of its features, she still showed clear signs of stress if too many days passed without seeing Tom. She would pace, vocalize, and at times, refuse to eat. It felt like the progress they had worked so hard for was beginning to slip away. After 2 weeks of these worrying signs, Jenny finally said what they had both been thinking. Tom, I think we need to consider that Gracie may not be fit for release. Tom had been thinking the same but had avoided saying it out loud. In wildlife rehabilitation, Returning an animal to the wild is always the goal. Anything else feels like falling short. Her leg has healed as much as it can, Jenny continued. But that limp will make hunting difficult. And behaviorally, she is attached to you. Not fully imprinted, but enough that it is affecting her ability to transition. So what are you suggesting? Tom asked, though he already had a feeling. Either placement in a sanctuary, Jenny said, pausing, or, she hesitated, knowing Tom was rarely in favor of the second option. A permanent role here, as an education animal. Education animals are those that cannot be released but are stable enough to live in human care and help teach people about wildlife conservation. This is usually only done when the animal can adapt without ongoing stress, and when the only alternative might be euthanasia. Let me think about it, Tom replied. That evening, he visited Gracie in the outdoor enclosure. He entered quietly through the keeper door after hours, something not typically allowed once an animal begins pre-release training, but he felt he needed to see her to truly understand the choice ahead. She appeared almost immediately, emerging from the den with more energy than he had seen in weeks. She approached with caution but purpose, stopping just a few feet from him. "Hey Gracie," he said gently. "I hear it has been tough lately." In the soft light of early evening, the two regarded one another. In her gaze, Tom saw more than alertness. He saw intelligence, and maybe even recognition. There was trust there. But there was also wildness, the core nature of a predator built to survive on its own. It was not a clear choice. Keeping her in captivity, even under ideal conditions, meant she would never have a fully natural life. But letting her go with reduced ability to hunt and an unusual comfort with people might put her in danger. Then Gracie did something she had never done before. She moved even closer, circled slowly, and lay down near his feet. Not touching him, but closer than ever before on her own. She yawned, revealing her teeth, and began to groom herself, showing no sign of unease. The message seemed clear. 6 months later, Tom stood in front of a newly finished enclosure at the far edge of the center's property. The once unused acre had become the Gracie Sanctuary, a large, natural space built especially for a bobcat that did not fully belong in the wild or in captivity. The choice to keep Gracie as a permanent resident had not come easily. The board had questions. Funding had to be arranged. And Tom had taken time to truly ask himself if this was best for her. In the end, her unique situation supported the decision. Her physical challenges and her unusual comfort around people made release risky. At the same time, her intelligence and resilience made her a strong candidate for a well-managed captive life. "What do you think?" Tom asked Jenny as they did one last walkthrough before the move. The new space had several den sites, a small stream, a mix of rocks, trees, and shaded areas, and enrichment stations designed to be changed regularly to keep her mentally active. Raised platforms allowed Gracie to stay hidden when school groups or guests visited to learn about bobcats. Remote cameras would let staff monitor her health and behavior without disturbing her. "It is impressive," Jenny said. "Better than most zoo exhibits I have seen." She gave a small smile. "I still think you are being unrealistic, but I cannot deny she is unique." "She chose to stay," Tom replied simply. "I am just respecting that choice." The transition to her new space went better than expected. Gracie explored slowly at first, but within days she was using all areas of the enclosure, especially a sunlit rock ledge overlooking the rehabilitation center, which became her favorite spot. Over the next year, Gracie became a well-known figure in the community. The center created an educational program based on her story, focusing on bobcat conservation, the impact of habitat loss, and the importance of wildlife corridors. School groups, conservationists, and photographers came to observe, though visits were carefully managed to prioritize Gracie's comfort. Tom still visited, though less often as she became more settled. Often, she would appear when she heard his voice, either watching from a distance or approaching the area nearest him. "I think she is truly content," Jenny said one fall afternoon as they watched Gracie swipe at the falling leaves. "As content as a wild animal can be in care." "She has found her balance," Tom agreed. "No longer completely wild, but never domesticated either." On the anniversary of her rescue, Exactly 2 years after Mike, the hiker, had found her barely alive, Tom brought his lunch to the bench near her habitat. It had become a tradition to mark the day their paths first crossed. To his surprise, Gracie came out from her usual hiding place and walked to the edge of the enclosure closest to him. She lay down, mirroring his posture from the other side of the barrier, and began grooming calmly. Tom smiled. "Happy anniversary, Gracie." As if acknowledging his words, she looked up, her eyes meeting his. They were confident, clear, and nothing like the fearful eyes he had seen on that first day. Then she looked away and returned to her grooming, relaxed in his presence but entirely her own being. In that moment, Tom understood what had drawn him so strongly to her from the beginning. It was not only her vulnerability or her will to survive, though both had moved him. It was the quiet reminder she gave about the nature of recovery, that healing is often more about being there than fixing everything. Not controlling or overwhelming. Not doing more than needed, but showing up with patience and respect. The sun began to set behind the Bridger Mountains, stretching shadows across Gracie's sanctuary. Tom finished his meal quietly, sitting beside the bobcat who had changed his life just as he had changed hers. That night, he made one final entry in Gracie's file, now thick with medical notes, behavioral updates, and habitat plans collected over 2 years. Gracie continues to do well in managed care. Physical condition is stable despite lasting injury to her right hind leg. Mental and emotional health evidenced by normal behavior, appropriate reaction to stimulation, and what can best be called a state of peace. She remains a reminder that healing is not always straightforward, that trust must be earned with care, and that gentleness can be more powerful than force. This case has changed my view of what it means to help wild animals, and what connection across species can truly look like. He paused for a moment, then added one last line. In helping her survive, I recovered a part of myself I did not realize was missing. 5 years later, the Bridger Mountain Wildlife Rehabilitation Center had grown significantly. Tom, now serving as director with a staff of 8, had used Gracie's journey to gain funding for more care units, research, and outreach efforts. Gracie, now around 7 years old, had become the center's heart. Her enclosure had been expanded 2 more times, and a dedicated team ensured she received regular mental challenges and a healthy mix of privacy and interaction. One warm June evening, Tom sat on his usual bench by her habitat, reviewing intake notes on a great horned owl with a wing issue and 2 young foxes found alone. The workload remained steady. The need was constant. But he had never been more sure of his role. A faint sound caught his attention. Gracie had appeared at her favorite lookout. Her eyes, golden and alert, still held that same quiet strength. A few gray hairs had appeared around her mouth, but she looked as calm and dignified as ever. "Just another day, Gracie," he said with a smile. As always, she observed him with that mix of distance and familiarity, never tame, but never fully wild. Their connection had become something rare, a meeting place between 2 different worlds. And in that space, something valuable had been found. A bond that needed no language, no control. One built on respect and quiet understanding. Tom packed up his files and stood. "See you tomorrow," he said. Gracie stretched out on her rock, secure in the place made just for her. Behind her, the Montana sky turned golden, glowing like her eyes that had once known only fear, but now held the calm strength of a creature that had suffered, survived, and found peace. In that soft evening light, the human and the bobcat existed in balance, each changed by the choice to remain, to be present, and to trust that healing would come in its own time. And through that choice, both had discovered something close to grace.